As a bit of a palate cleanser after the vehicles which we spoke about in 1.61 for Gran Turismo, I thought let's go back to a day one vehicle, not least of which because it is a returning legend, but more so because it was a pre-order bonus car. It is of course the Castrol Supra, iconic Super GT car, GT500 car, JGTC car, depending on how you want to refer to it, and of course this was a car which we'd last seen in Gran Turismo 6. It was already a premium as well. We used to have quite a few different Super GT cars, especially if you go further back. There were vehicles which were no longer featured, like the R33 kind of era even, whereas more so in Gran Turismo 4 and onward, they focused in on more like the A80 Supra generation, the R34 Skyline generation, with a few outliers but not quite as many. And you'd have loads of different liveries, loads of different variations, and this one of course is one of the standouts, being probably, arguably, the most iconic of them all. In a funny kind of way, there's been this almost not so great byproduct from, I would say, a fun perspective, depending on of course what you consider fun within Gran Turismo. But what I mean by this is, as Gran Turismo has become more realistic, particularly when it comes to physics and the representation of certain race cars, I don't know if you guys have noticed this as well, but I'm sure you have if you've been, like me, playing the series for a good long while. This trajectory of making vehicles more accurate to how they should be portrayed. A prime example being the return of the Toyota GT1, but kind of strangely almost, at least initially, putting it in Group 2, which doesn't feel right. You expect it to be in Group 1, it feels like it should be. It's such an iconic, top tier car, and an R390 as well would presumably be in Group 2 also, because that's where it should be, which is weird to think back to like the Gran Turismo 3 days, where the R390 was the one to beat, even for stuff like the 787B, or the Formula car, quite frankly, under certain circumstances. The payoff to that is of course that you have the better realism, where certain cars are going up against each other which should be more accurate. For example, if you compare the updates in aero, in particular, between newer and older DTM cars, newer and older Super GT cars, you can feel a massive gulf in performance between those, and that is exactly what it should be from that realism perspective. The unfortunate byproduct, and this car really does highlight it to me, or it's one of the vehicles which does. Funny how it keeps being Toyotas for me that highlights that for some reason. It's the kind of vehicle where back in the day you'd see like an Escudo, a Panos, a Lister Storm, a Gillett Vertigo, all of these totally random cars. There'd be a Ford Falcon V8 supercar in there, and they were all kind of good enough to win, depending on which one you just wanted to represent. And the AI would always be kind of bunched up together. They'd be fairly similar. It was very rare for one particular race car to just run away from everything else, and when it did, it stood out, like the R390. The downside is that these days, that doesn't really feel like it happens quite so much. You'll occasionally, of course, have a car to my later point which will be better than everything else, but even then balance of performance tends to neuter that quite a lot if the car can be used at all. What I'm talking about is more so, it feels kind of a shame to me how many of these legends that for many of us we grew up with have been really neutered by the real world. And you can't really be mad at it because it is more realistic, but stuff like the GT1, or for example if the Minolta were to come back, it would not be this all-conquering monster, or at least in all likelihood it wouldn't be, that many of us are expecting. It would of course be in Group 1, but it wouldn't be, absolutely unbeatable feeling, or this overpowered extreme beast. Even look at the examples which I've mentioned, look at others like the Chaparral 2J or the Escudo. Those used to be pretty much unbeatable cars, but they probably wouldn't feel like that anymore. The Escudo feels more realistic. It's still tremendously quick, but it's got a lot of turbo lag. In the case of the Chaparral, it's still fantastic, but actually feels like a 1970s car to some degree now. Still OP for its time, but it's certainly not the ridiculous cheat car that it used to be in the Gran Turismo 4 days, and for me it's weird to see how that's happened with vehicles like this as well. To talk more specifically about this one's spec, of course it was a pre-order bonus car. You can get it for about 1.6 mil, and funnily enough it's actually currently in the legendary dealer, and I didn't plan for that to be the case. It has 492 horses, 1150 kilos, and obviously a lot of these specs are kind of irrelevant in Group 4, Group 3, Group 2, especially 4 and 3, because balance of performance just changes stuff wildly. One thing which I really would be curious to know though is, I know that for some of you, and myself if I did more online racing, I would certainly be one of these people, I would go out of my way to support the older stuff. The McLaren F1 GTRs, the Aston DBR9s, this Supra, because there's just something more charming about this era, and of course nostalgia is a big part of that. How many of you actually do that if you're more concerned with just winning? I'd be curious to know, do you find yourself using cars like this a lot? Maybe never? Within context of Super GT perhaps, if you want to get more specific, maybe more so just Group 3 in general, or just career mode in general. Do you find yourself using these older cars, or perhaps more specifically this one, compared to newer stuff? And also as another offshoot question from that point, if you had the option of having some of those legends return, like the Lister, the Panos, the Gillett, various others as well, or even older GT500s, like the R33 kind of era, era, would you choose that over newer stuff, or would you choose the newer kind of Blancpain, you know, GT3, GT2 even, maybe from the 2000s? Would you go newer, stuff which we haven't had before, or would you prefer to have some of those legends back? I would be curious to know how the community would kind of fall. I kind of think some of it would depend on when you started playing Gran Turismo, and if you're curious about how the car actually drives, well, simply put, there's not much to say. It's really good to work with. It's great on fuel, because you don't necessarily need to have a huge amount of power, at least against the AI, and as you can see here in the race, just use your manual gearbox well, set your fuel map a bit more modest, and you can easily do the entire race without worrying about fuel or tyres. It's a pleasure to work with. It feels like an endurance racer. It feels like it's just ready to take on Le Mans on one weekend and then, you know, head to Suzuka or Fuji for GT500 the next weekend. It's a very versatile car. That's the one thing which I'm glad it does still feel, because these cars always used to feel very versatile, and they still do. It's a legend for a reason. It's a fantastic collector's piece, much like the older, you know, Calsonic Skyline would be that I did the special projects for. But that's it for my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the questions which I posited, and of course I'll see you in future with more GT7. But for now, thanks for watching.